If you've spent any time learning about MBTI, you've probably noticed something strange. The same cognitive function can seem completely different depending on which personality type is using it. So which description is actually correct? The answer is all of them. Let's find out why. Part 1. Understanding the function. Extroverted intuition is fundamentally about possibility. It is the part of the mind that looks at what is happening and naturally asks, what else could this become? Instead of treating the current situation as a fixed reality, it tends to see it as a starting point surrounded by alternatives, connections, interpretations, and potential directions. Extroverted intuition pays attention to relationships between ideas. One thought can lead to another, which leads to another, and suddenly something that seemed unrelated becomes relevant. A conversation about cooking might lead to an idea for a business, which leads to a question about technology, which leads to an entirely different project. The important part is not the specific ideas themselves, but the ability to move between them and notice what they could connect to. This function evaluates situations primarily through possibility and potential. When presented with a problem, it may not immediately ask, what has worked before? Or, what is the most efficient solution? Instead, it wants to explore the solution space. What are the options? What assumptions are we making? Is there another way to approach this? What happens if we change one part of the situation? That makes curiosity one of its strongest motivations. Extroverted intuition wants room to explore, experiment, and discover. It is energized by novelty, but novelty by itself is not really the point. What matters is what novelty might reveal. A new experience is interesting because it could lead somewhere unexpected. This is also where one of the biggest misconceptions about extroverted intuition comes from. It is often reduced to simply being creative or having lots of ideas. Those can certainly be expressions of it, but the function is broader than creativity in the artistic sense. Extroverted intuition can show up as brainstorming, questioning assumptions, making connections, seeing alternate interpretations, predicting possibilities, or recognizing opportunities that other people have overlooked. An extroverted intuition is not the same thing as constantly chasing new experiences. Someone can have very little interest in novelty while still being capable of thinking in terms of possibilities. Likewise, someone can love trying new things without naturally seeing the web of connections and alternatives that extroverted intuition is concerned with. At its core, extroverted intuition expands the field of what might be possible. Its role is to keep the mind from becoming trapped by a single interpretation of reality. But the way a person relates to that process changes dramatically depending on where extroverted intuition sits in their cognitive stack. Part 2. Hero Function. Extroverted intuition is the hero function for ENFP and ENTP. In this position, the function is not merely something the person can use. It is one of the primary ways they naturally engage with the world and understand what is happening around them. When extroverted intuition is completely trusted, possibility becomes almost instinctive. The person can walk into an ordinary situation and immediately start seeing different directions it could take. A problem that looks limiting to someone else may actually feel stimulating, because limitations create something to work around. Instead of asking whether something can be done exactly as it currently exists, the mind starts looking for another angle. This can make the person remarkably adaptable. If a plan falls apart, the loss of the original plan does not necessarily mean the loss of momentum. There may already be three other possibilities forming in the background. When one door closes, extroverted intuition is often more interested in asking where the other doors are than standing in front of the closed one. It can also make these people excellent idea generators. Give them a vague concept, and they may quickly turn it into several different concepts. Ask them how a situation could develop, and they may naturally explore multiple outcomes. In conversation, this can look like jumping between topics, but underneath those jumps, there is often a chain of associations connecting everything together. The blind spot is that possibility can become more attractive than commitment. If every option contains something interesting, choosing one means deliberately giving up the others. Someone who deeply trusts extroverted intuition may therefore keep expanding the possibilities long after it would be useful to narrow them down. There can also be a tendency to mistake potential for probability. Just because something could happen does not mean it is likely to happen, practical to pursue, or worth pursuing. Mature use of extroverted intuition does not require giving up its endless curiosity. It means learning when exploration has produced enough information to make a decision. In the hero position, then, extroverted intuition feels like a natural home base. Possibilities are trusted, connections are noticed quickly, and uncertainty can be exciting rather than threatening. But that confidence also means learning that not every possibility needs to become a path. Part 3. Parent Function. Extroverted intuition is the parent function for INFP and INTP. Here, the function is still highly valued and capable, but the relationship with it is different. Instead of being the primary driver of exploration, extroverted intuition becomes something that can be deliberately used to guide, support, and expand both the person's own thinking and the thinking of others. This position tends to give someone a growing confidence in recognizing possibilities without necessarily needing to chase all of them. The person may be good at looking at a complicated situation and helping someone see options they had not considered. If a friend feels trapped by a particular problem, extroverted intuition can naturally step in with, "It doesn't have to be this way. Here are some other ways we could approach it." That is where the parent quality becomes especially important. The function is not simply generating possibilities for entertainment, it can be used responsibly. A person may brainstorm solutions, anticipate different outcomes, challenge someone's assumptions, or encourage them to consider a perspective they had dismissed too quickly. There is often a practical confidence here that develops through experience. The person learns that exploring possibilities can genuinely help. They may become the one who notices that a plan has an overlooked alternative, that two seemingly unrelated ideas could work together, or that a problem has more flexibility than it first appeared to have. At the same time, responsibility creates a natural limit. If you are helping someone, throwing 20 possibilities at them is not necessarily useful. Good use of extroverted intuition in the parent position means knowing how to expand someone's perspective without overwhelming them. This is also why the parent position can become more disciplined than the hero position. The function is still exploratory, but it has a responsibility attached to it. Possibilities should lead somewhere useful. Curiosity becomes something that can serve a purpose rather than simply something that demands attention. So extroverted intuition in the parent position is confident enough to explore, but responsible enough to ask what that exploration is actually accomplishing. And when we move one step further down the stack, that confidence becomes much less consistent. Part 4. Child Function. Extroverted intuition is the child function for ESFJ and ESTJ. Here, the function is still capable of opening up possibilities, but it is experienced in a much more playful and developing way. The child position often enjoys extroverted intuition for the sheer fun of it. Coming up with an unusual idea, imagining an alternative outcome, making a strange connection, or suddenly thinking of a completely different approach can feel refreshing. There is an innocence to it because the function does not necessarily need to justify itself through expertise or responsibility. This can create moments where someone becomes surprisingly imaginative. They might start joking about ridiculous possibilities, invent an elaborate hypothetical scenario, or suddenly become fascinated by an idea that has no immediate practical purpose. The point is simply that exploring possibilities feels good, but because the function is still developing, this exploration can also be inconsistent. Sometimes the possibilities are genuinely insightful, other times they may be unrealistic, unnecessary, or pursued simply because they are interesting. The person is learning what extroverted intuition can do and, just as importantly, learning when to take its suggestions seriously. That developmental quality can also make the function feel liberating. Someone who is usually focused on what needs to be done can benefit from occasionally asking what could be done instead. They may discover that not every decision needs to follow the familiar route, and that experimenting with alternatives does not automatically mean abandoning everything that already works. As the function matures, the playful curiosity can become more useful without losing its sense of enjoyment. The person does not need to turn extroverted intuition into their entire way of thinking. They simply become more comfortable letting possibility into situations where they once saw only one obvious path. In the child position, then, extroverted intuition is less about mastery and more about discovery. It is a part of the mind that wants permission to play with "what if," and sometimes that playful question is exactly what allows something new to emerge. But when extroverted intuition occupies the inferior position, "what if" can carry a very different emotional weight. Part 5. Inferior Function. Extroverted intuition is the inferior function for ISFJ and ISTJ. Here, the function is often admired because it represents something the person knows is valuable, but it does not necessarily feel safe, natural, or reliable to use. The person may recognize the importance of possibilities and alternative perspectives while still preferring the security of what is known and established. Extroverted intuition can therefore become something they want more of without always trusting themselves to use it effectively. They may admire people who seem endlessly inventive, flexible, or comfortable with uncertainty, while simultaneously feeling that this way of thinking is difficult to reproduce in themselves. This can create insecurity around ambiguity. When there are too many possibilities and no obvious answer, the mind may become uncomfortable. Instead of experiencing uncertainty as an invitation to explore, it can feel like a loss of stability. The challenge is not that the person cannot imagine alternatives, it is that they may struggle to know which possibilities deserve trust. And yet, this same function can become an important source of growth. Developing extroverted intuition means gradually learning that uncertainty does not automatically mean danger, and that considering alternatives does not require abandoning everything familiar. A person can keep what works while still allowing themselves to ask what else might be possible. There can also be moments of genuine confidence. With enough experience, someone may suddenly recognize an unexpected connection, come up with an alternative solution, or correctly anticipate where a situation could go. Those experiences can be surprisingly empowering because they demonstrate that the ability was there all along. Under stress, however, inferior extroverted intuition can become distorted. Instead of calmly exploring possibilities, the mind may become overwhelmed by them. Every potential outcome can start to feel equally important, and unlikely possibilities may receive far more attention than they deserve. What normally feels like curiosity can turn into uncertainty, worry, or an exhausting search for every possible way something could go wrong. That is why the inferior function is not simply a weakness. It is a part of the mind that often begins with insecurity, but contains enormous developmental potential. Learning to trust extroverted intuition does not mean becoming endlessly spontaneous or abandoning familiar structure. It means becoming more comfortable with the fact that reality contains possibilities that cannot always be predicted in advance. The function itself has not changed from the hero position to the inferior position. Extroverted intuition is still doing the same fundamental thing, expanding the field of what could be. What changes is the person's confidence in that process, their awareness of it, and their ability to use it deliberately. By now, hopefully you've seen that this cognitive function never actually changed. Whether it appeared as the hero, parent, child, or inferior function, it was always the same underlying cognitive process. What changed was the person's relationship with it. One position trusted it instinctively, another used it to support others, another approached it with comfort and curiosity, and another admired it while struggling to fully trust it. In the next video, we'll continue by exploring how this same cognitive function appears in the shadow through the nemesis, critic, trickster, and demon functions.